marketing leadership, build strategies, pursue innovation, and align resources to power a world-class customer journey through unprecedented times, right? So right now we are ready to welcome our panelists onto stage. I need you to join me and give them the welcome that they are definitely deserving of. So a huge round of applause. I will keep clapping right here, and I want you to clap in your space that you've created joining us right now. So please welcome someone who is an analytics leader with hands-on experience in building and nurturing high-energy team of analytics professionals, having 18 years of experience in banking and information technology operations. We have with us to moderate Head Analytics, Financial Markets Operations, Standard Chartered Global Business Services. Please put your hands together for Miss Vidya Veera Raghavan. She joins us on screen right now. You see her. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. And we welcome our panelists onto stage, onto our virtual stage. Someone who has 17 years of a corporate journey, and the journey has included working with the most iconic global and Indian brands and organizations, which makes him experienced in over 2/3 of the consumer product categories in the world. Please welcome Director and Country Manager, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, Brunei at the Kraft Heinz Company. Please welcome Mr. Saumil Mehta. He's right there. A huge round of applause. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We now welcome someone who has 20+ years of successful professional experience, wherein she has led global, regional, and local marketing teams effectively to spearhead growth with a competitive edge. Please welcome Director, Nutrition Growth Platforms and Disruptive Innovation, Amway, Miss Dipali Shukla joins us on screen. Welcome. Keep the applause coming as we now welcome someone who has been enjoying customer and brand-centric roles for the last 25 years with some of the most iconic organizations. We have with us Senior Vice President, Customer Centricity, Aditya Birla Group, Mr. Prakash Dadlani. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Moving on, as we now welcome someone who is a marketing and brand professional with 25 years of professional experience at senior strategic levels across varied domains of brand building, advertising, business communication, innovation, and many more. He's with us right now, President and Group Head, Marketing, Service Quality, Innovation, and Value Added Services at Thomas Cook India Group. Please welcome Mr. Abraham Alapat. Welcome, sir. Thank you for joining us. Up next, we welcome a seasoned professional with over 2 decades of experience in distribution, operations, and business development in the BFSI industry. We have with us EVP and Head Customer Advisory, Max Life Insurance Company Limited. On screen right now, please welcome Mr. Rakesh Pandey. And the applause has to keep coming as we now welcome to join our panel someone who brings experience in the area of customer service, shared services, managed services, project and program management, amongst many other services. Director, Commercial Excellence, PMO and AppSure, Abbott Primary Care, Abbott Healthcare Private Limited. Please welcome onto your screens Mr. Tushar Singh. All right, this is an amazing panel. Without further ado, I hand over to our moderator to take this session forward. Ma'am.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction. We have very, very senior and diversified panel members here. I would like to start our conversation today. Our panel topic is marketing leadership, building strategies, pursue innovation, and align resources to power a world-class customer journey through unprecedented times. I know the last year has been very, very difficult for a lot of us, and we have overcome this, and we are just in the last lap of completing that with our vaccinations in place, and then we will all be back to the new normal, not the real normal. So I will probably start the conversation. Before jumping on to the main discussion itself, let's talk about each one of our panel members here. And I would let them do the talking, give them a couple of minutes to describe what they have done in the past. Maybe we can start go around the table and finish our conversation with that and then move on to our subject. May I welcome Saumil Mehta to do the first.
Thank you, Vidya. I hope I'm audible at the onset, first of all. In case there are issues, because we are talking about, or a part of our discussion will be about technology-led disruption, and it can create some of the disruption in terms of the audio and video. Thank you everyone. Thank you to the forum. Thank you everyone, and thank you to my August panelists to be a part of this. My name is Saumil Mehta. I have been into the product space all my life, not service space. I have worked with iconic organizations like PepsiCo, Pidilite, Samsung, Crompton Greaves Consumer Electricals, and currently I'm working with the Kraft Heinz company. I'm managing the business for India and some of the Southeast Asian countries. I have done varied sales and marketing roles in all these organizations, and looking forward eagerly to learning and from the extremely, I would say, eclectic mix of people on this panel. Thank you, Vidya.
Great. Thanks. Nice to have you, Saumil. I'll move on to Dipali Shukla next. Dipali, why don't you give us your background?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Am I audible? All right. Nice to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. Indeed, a great panel of expert speakers from marketing function. Myself, yes, I too have 20 plus years of experience in marketing, and I have worked through different industries. I worked in pharmaceutical industry, FMCG, and now I'm working with the direct selling industry. Indeed, throughout my journey, professional journey, I've been a marketer and handled India market to start with. So ground experience in the India market. And then I got to the region, which included Europe, Russia, Africa, and India. So that got me an exposure to the outside world, outside my comfort zone, of course. And post that, I was very fortunate that I could get into the global role. So I am now looking after the global innovation platforms for Neutralite, the brand, in Amway. And I'm very much glad to be here and learn from such great people in this panel and outside the panel, the other panels that have happened, and look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Great, nice to have you, Dipali. I'll move on to Mr. Alapat now. Why don't you give us a background, Ikram?
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. I've had a 25-year professional journey after an MBA in marketing and international marketing. I spent 10 years at advertising, out of which 5 were with Ogilvy, where I left as client services director. I then moved on to the client side, starting with my first assignment at Reliance Capital, where I headed the marketing for the Reliance Mutual Fund and saw it on a terrific upward trajectory in line with the equity bull run. After a few years at Reliance, I did a short stint at Development Credit Bank as their head CMO, and then left to join and be part of the startup for both Future Generali Life and General as the head of marketing, rewards and relationships, etc. I joined Thomas Cook in 2012, and since then we've been on a acquisition spree and are now multinational in our own right, including buying the brand from the parent company. We are ourselves now as Thomas Cook India in 25 countries and 5 continents. So it's been quite a journey, and it's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to share it with this panel. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Abraham. I would move on to Tushar Singh now. Why don't you give us your background?
Thanks, Vidya. It's a pleasure to be here and part of this August panel. My name is Tushar Singh. I have 20 plus years of experience, primarily in the project management, program management, operations area, a lot of it in the customer experience space. So I've worked in multiple industry verticals, BFSI, telecom, and now pharmaceuticals for the last 7 years. In my current assignment at Abbott, I kind of took a bit of a segue. So currently I handle what we call commercial excellence, strategy, and a P&L portfolio for generics medication. Extremely happy to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. I would move on to Mr. Rakesh Pandey next. Rakesh?
Yeah, hi Vidya, good afternoon. It's great to be here with this panel. As you know, I've been, and I think I was introduced, I've been in this industry for life insurance industry for about 2 decades, a little more than that. Also worked briefly for a couple of BPOs early on, like GE Capital, WNS, A large part of my stint has been with life insurance company, which is Max Life, most admired life insurance company, as it is called, as we call it in the industry. Handled various roles, right from customer service and experience roles to business development, to sales, to fulfillment, and both on the retail and the institutional side. So right now I am taking care of customer advisory, which is a service to sales channel, a very large service to sales channel business of Max Life. And it's really a pleasure to be here with eminent industry leaders, and looking forward to the interactions.
Great. Prakash Sadlani, not left you. Please go ahead. Give us your introduction.
Sure. Thanks, Vidya. Thanks, everyone. So glad to be here today. So 25 years, I really wonder how they passed, but I've been lucky that it's all been with the customer and to an extent with brand. And across the first roles with Castrol, then with Godrej, then 3M, now Aditya Birla, and of course with Future Group in between, it's always been the customer all the way. And hence the topic that I've chosen in this panel, and we all, of course, together, is an interesting part called customer journeys, where my current company, Aditya Birla, has taken it to the next level. But more about that when we start talking together. Thank you for that.
Of course, of course. Thank you very much, all of you. Welcome again. Definitely, I have to say a couple of words from my side. So I'm Vidya Veeraraghavan. I have been in the corporate industry for almost 2 decades, currently handling analytics for financial market operations in Standard Chartered Bank. And today we are going to discuss more about the innovation, more about the customer journey. And we have to start with a very good survey, I would say. So that is from Gartner. It was on the marketing leaders that they must prioritize 4 core competencies, that is to survive and thrive in 2021 and beyond. This is post the pandemic, the survey has been taken. So I would like to take the advices from you guys. So the 4 competencies that they talk about is the customer understanding, adaptive and agile planning, data-driven decision making, strategic cost optimization. In your opinion, how ready are the organizations in prioritizing these? I'm going to push this to Tushar to just understand why this is important, and are we ready?
Thanks, Vidya. So in fact, if I can take the liberty, I would add 2 more competencies to the list.
Okay.
The 5th one would be agile execution. I mean, there's no point in agile planning if it's not backed up by agile execution. And the 6th one would be having an agile and resilient supply chain. So while marketers, we are not really concerned, I mean, we're not really responsible for supply chains, but a lot of our inputs kind of feed into the design and ultimate execution of supply chains. And we kind of saw the importance of that in the last year when the pandemic struck us. So in terms, I mean, and I would say it's a little bit general. I think all organizations need these competencies. And obviously different organizations in different industry verticals are at different points in their, I would say, maturity levels when these 4 competencies are concerned. And I say in today's world, when things are becoming more chaotic and more, I would say, unpredictable. Of course, we had the pandemic last year, but even otherwise, if you see the last 5 to 6 years, extreme weather conditions, I mean, events have become more common because of, let's say, global warming. And many of us work in industries which are impacted by that. And I can think of Thomas Cook, hurricane can spoil your season for an island vacation and so on. Plus in consumer goods, if you have a scorching summer, your beverage sales really go through the roof while other things stand. So I think it's become more unpredictable. And we had a snowstorm in Texas. Who thinks of a snowstorm in Texas of all the places, right? So I think these competencies have become, more and more important for marketing leaders and managers or anybody who wants to run a large organization. My response would be in the context of obviously a large, multi-geography kind of organization. If I look at these competencies and if I kind of, see, I kind of try to relate it to my experience across different industry verticals and also what I read and what I hear about, I think when it comes to cost optimization, I think most of us are there. And also I would like to point out, these competencies, achieving excellence in these competencies is an ongoing journey. It's, there's no perfect end state. And obviously it's very contextual. And as the situation changes, kind of, what is required also changes. But if I look at these companies one by one, I think when it comes to cost optimization, most of us are there. Unless you're a Google or maybe an Apple, we have to worry about the margins, and kind of cost plays a big part over there. And if I kind of look at the context of the pharma space, any large pharma marketing organization literally have hundreds of SKUs and literally hundreds of brands. So there's always, opportunity everywhere to kind of optimize the cost, and they become pretty good to kind of make it an ongoing process rather than kind of event-based, projects. So I think over there, I think we are reasonably in good shape. Adaptive planning, I think again, all large organizations, we have our BCP, DRs in place. I think we do kind of a risk management and scenario planning, etc., etc. So I think again, that's reasonably, I think I would say we are there. I would say large organizations are there. Agile supply, I would say, the other would be in terms of agile supply chains, agile execution, especially in the Indian context. We saw that happening, as Indians, I think, nothing kind of gets the juices flowing like a good crisis, right? So, in the pandemic, the jugaad mentality was at its best. So I think we did a pretty good job over there. Agile supply chains, definitely, and this is very, I would say, contextual to the pharma space. We are fortunate to have a fairly, evolved ecosystem for pharma, whether it comes to raw material suppliers or when it comes to manufacturing, etc., within, within India. So we were able to adapt fairly quickly, and during the pandemic, for example, we saw a spurt in demand for things like, let's say, vitamins and minerals, while there was a kind of downtrend for other products. So we were able to quickly, shift manufacturing from one area to other, kind of respond to that crisis. I think two areas where large organizations, especially in the Indian context, still have some way to go is kind of customer understanding, and the other one would be data-driven decision making. While these are two areas where a lot of lip service is given, in some way they are also interconnected, because obviously a lot of customer insighting is kind of quantitative, which is kind of data-driven. Right. So a lot of lip service is given, and to be fair to people, I think they want to kind of really kind of excel in these areas. But number of things hold us back. So one is structural in nature. So especially in the context of India and other emerging markets, the quality of data which is available for you is kind of tends to be a little patchy. So for example, my colleagues in the developed markets literally would have sales by retail outlets almost on a real-time basis. I mean, I get kind of struggle to get data on a monthly basis. So those are that could be one kind of structural factor.
Legacy. You're talking about the legacy environment that we are in.
Yeah, so it's a legacy environment and still very much a reality. While things are improving, but I think those are that's a structural factor. Number two.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and number two would be also cultural and behavioral aspects within organizations, especially let's say for want of a better word. The pre-internet industries like pharma and maybe consumer goods, a lot of the senior leadership cut their teeth in the pre-internet era. So you kind of still see that legacy factor at play when it comes to decision making. People prefer to go by their gut rather than wait for the data to come.
That's right. Yeah, we see a lot of it in our organization also. So Tushar, you are not alone. A lot of big banks and the big insurance companies, the place that I belong to. So the adoption rate is quite low because of the legacy systems that stop us from moving forward. What I hear largely from you is, Tushar, that largely the large corporations are there, but there are some mindset changes that probably is required. Is that something that you would agree with?
Absolutely, bang on with you. You got it.
Great. Thank you so much. That was quite detailed, and it gave us a sense of where we are as the large organizations are. I would move on to marketing strategies, and these are directly related to ROI. Everybody knows this, right? So when you talk about that, what are the top 3 key indicators that you assess to measure the effectiveness of your strategy? Because nothing goes unmeasured in an organization, because everything relates, whether it's your cost or your ROI, it all relates to your measurement, how you measure it. Maybe I can push this to Dipali. Have you seen any key indicators that, especially in the COVID times, that people have started measuring more to see the effectiveness of the marketing strategies? Do you think anything over and above what they were already doing?
Yeah, so thank you, Vidya, for this opportunity. I agree, whenever we work on marketing strategies, the key things that come to our mind to achieve the ROI is that either in terms of sales objectives, that is volume sale or growth, or we achieve the bottom line profitability. But I think as we are emerging and we have entered this pandemic and we are coming out of it, what's become very, very critical for organizations is that how do I reach out to the customers and how do I make them stay with me? Because the world has changed and we all are everything with the lockout, etc. I think so. What becomes very important is that, and let me tell you, I know since the time things have changed through the pandemic, every organization has become much more active. Life has really, we have started working, I think, 18 hours a day because the work pressure has certainly,
Everybody
exactly. So, and
now it is different.
yeah, so because somewhere we were living in a world, yeah, this is how the life is going on. But today our pressure has increased that number one, how do I reach more customers? So that is definitely one of the key KPIs we are trying to focus very aggressively. But the story doesn't end there. I can reach out to the customers and I maybe, if I get an opportunity, today's world has got on digital. We all are today sitting in the virtual world. So reaching out to more penetration definitely has become easier, but definitely the first KPI that I would refer to in this world of new after post pandemic is how do I reach to new customers and acquisition of new customers, as I may put it. The second important KPI for us is retaining those customers. So as I said, everybody is trying to, either they're going after the Gen Z or they're going after the millennial moms because they are the key target audience, or maybe in some other parts of the world where the elderly population is more, since I work with different parts of the world, it's the senior people are trying to address. But what is important is how do I retain them? That customer loyalty quotient that's become very, very important. Most of, because in this digital world, so many, everybody is bombarding, the customers with opportunities, awareness, offers, whatever you may say. And third, which becomes very important for the organization, and as you said, how to measure the strategy ROI, is consumer trust. So that's very critical. If you're able to achieve that quotient, I think that is a long-term way of thinking for any strategy to be successful. So
Right.
many times, many organizations are very focused on short term. I get this volume sale, I get this market share, and this is my profitability. But I think for sustainability, which becomes very important, and in today's dynamic world, acquisition, retention, loyalty. If these three questions we are able to address, I think we would have a sustainable long time impact that can be measured through our strategies that the organization is.
Excellent points, Dipali. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think as a customer myself, I would want to trust the person who is selling me something. I think it was bang on. Thank you so much. I would move on to Somit. Now that you talked about, Dipali, about the customer and the measures that we have to take to retain them, I will probably route this question to Somit. Somit, adapting to customer intelligence, do you think creating a holistic view across the channels and devices to deliver personalized experiences will bear better customer experience and increase the customer satisfaction rate, or should we do something more? What's your thought?
Thank you, Vidya, for this question. Well, there can be two-part answers to the question as I see it. And it depends on the view being product-centric, which is physical product-centric, or a service-centric. I mean, omni-channel touchpoint creation and giving a seamless, plus unified, plus consistent customer experience is the key to develop, as well as retain, sustain, and even enhance brand as well as usage loyalty across both, and product and services are critical. However, things can get slightly skewed a bit on the service front, where digital enables even the last mile delivery as well. Whereas in case of a physical product, the last mile delivery still involves a complete human touch point. So being in product environment all my life, I would like to present the product view over here. Product still needs holistic view across channels and devices to deliver customer delight. And this just doesn't involve only delight through digitization or even only product performance. It involves even tiny nuances like packaging or a sustainable packaging that holds up right till the product is in the hands of the consumer. I mean, just imagine an iPhone, which still requires mortgaging your kidneys, if not outright sale, if it is delivered to the consumer with a tattered packaging. Though the product would perform perfectly, isn't that going to tarnish or leave a sour thought in the mind of the consumer? Another aspect is understanding the difference between customer and consumer. For products, every product handler till it reaches the actual user is a customer. These customers are also known as value chain, and they have huge ability to influence the decision of the customer or consumer that are downstream in the value chain. So the holistic view encompasses people beyond marketing, MarTech, Marcom, even CX manager. It involves everyone in the organization, and it should encompass delivering CX across every step of the value chain. For example, in the case of iPhone, I would say the packaging R&D also is involved in delivering customer experience. So to summarize, have a view that covers every corporate function, every employee, including third-party people, and create a passion for improving the CX score or the CSAT score with each passing consumer transaction.
Great, great. In banking industry, we normally say that risk is everybody's business. What I hear you say is marketing is also everybody's business. I hear Prakash has a view on this. Prakash, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, one of the pieces I will certainly talk on later, but you touched a very good point on value chain. Too often do we just look at our immediate customer, and there's a lot of headroom available to educate our cross-functional teams on understanding the customer and even run down the level down. So in that process, it is up to the leadership to walk the talk and demonstrate doing that upfront. So that's a small point. I'll elaborate later, but I thought you touched a very good point. Go ahead, Vidya.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Great. So I have, now that you're talking about customer experience, I would like to invite Rakesh to give me an answer to this particular part of question that I had. As a result of the crisis, what has been the effect on the customer experience? Because the leader's strategy should also change, and it has to cement the client experience and also the customer service. What is your thought on that?
Good question, Vidya. I think, leaders, across industries, across the globe on CX front have been actually, debating this and discussing this for a while now. But actually, there are 4 themes that really comes out very prominently, and this would apply to all industries, all businesses, all products and services. And I would talk about these 4 things. First and foremost, Vidya, it is empathy that really has come out as a very crucial, important theme that needs to be discussed, deliberated as part of a CX strategy across all businesses for leaders to think about and deliberate. And what empathy means really is about not just about human touch, but really going beyond that and showing care, demonstrating that emotional connect with your customers, especially during unprecedented times. And this is what the last 1 year has taught us. When the entire globe, country, people were going through a lot of anxiety, fear, loss of life, health, they needed companies to be responsive and to be empathetic, as they engaged with their audience, customers. So that's one. And if you really, while human touch has been something that has been debated quite a while, for a while now. For last couple of years, I've heard and attended CX leaders talk about it. But I think empathy is something that I haven't really very clearly heard people talking about. And I would like you to just allow me a 30 seconds to share an example. This is about a very funny video clip that went viral, where this person is calling out to a sweet shop to order some sweets, and he's directed to IVR, and the IVR actually tells him press 1 for English and 2 for Hindi. And then the guy says, okay, he does that. And then, again, he is asked to press 1 for laddu with sweets and 2 for laddu with vanaspati and so on. And then, again, and that is an endless menu and endless wait time. Now, in times like these, and while this is a funny example, but the point here is that, and we have all experienced as consumers, and especially in times like these, you need to be not just having a human touch instead of a mechanized response, but also the element of empathy, really, to illustrate my point. So So that is one. Two is personalization, and I heard Saumil talk about it. I think personalization is something that now a customer would demand. And let me share an example with you. In the life insurance business, typically when one has to make a premium payment, the options are either a physical check that can be dropped at any of the boxes or making an online payment. So when the country went down on a lockdown, in a lockdown phase, and there were containment zones everywhere, we are all encouraging, customers to pay through the online channels. But there were customers who said, okay, I'm not confident, I'm not comfortable using online, etc. Now, please arrange for a check pickup. And it was not easy because they could not step out. Many of these places were in containment zones, and they were at the risk of their policies getting lapsed and so on. So we actually, for the first time, we introduced, an arrangement where there was a personalized check pickup, through a vendor. That was something that was arranged as a stopgap. And then those are the things that really, I would like to us to sort of, think about that, as times are changing, and especially, in times like these, one needs to have multi-channel, omni-channel, and personalized, approach to meet to customers' demand and to allow them to transact in many ways as they would choose to. That's number two. Number three is clearly, speed and convenience, and that is the third element that really came out as a learning, as an insight from what at least I experienced and our industry went through in the last 1 year or so. What we witnessed during the onset of the pandemic, Vidya, is that people were actually, looking at buying term insurance cover because they were fearing for, loss of life, family, etc., etc. But, so what we focused was, we focused on making the journey simpler and convenient. Okay, and one example I would give is that we introduced this concept called buy now, pay later. Now, this was never prevalent in a life insurance, or for that matter a financial services business, but we were pioneers of this. We actually innovated this. You pay 2 rupees, apply for your insurance policy, and once the risk gets accepted is when actually the real payment happens. So how you innovate, how you really respond to different times, and with speed and agility is the third element that would be very, very relevant, for CX leaders. And the last one, Vidya, is going to be the omni-channel, ecosystem, because what we realized is that customers today want choices, different ways to be able to transact with you as a service provider or a product provider, and therefore all these channels, WhatsApp, video, SMS, which is going beyond emails and websites, etc., is gaining prominence. And I think building a holistic ecosystem around omni-channel touch points is something that would be the fourth and the last one, to summarize what I had to share on the question.
Okay, it's excellent point. In fact, spoiled for choices, if you have children at home, you will definitely understand this, because whenever you offer something, you're like, can't I just take something else? That always comes up when they don't like the food. Customer journey, it's quite when you talk about empathy, and you have to walk through them throughout your time. So Prakash, I would probably come to you on the customer journey, right? So you incorporate customer journey into your marketing strategy, and how could you change that, change the strategic thinking around that, and how has it changed in the last, particularly in the last COVID time? You're mute.
This always happens once, yeah. The journey started about 6 years back when Mr. Birla started this whole function of customer centricity in the organization. And when that was being discussed, one of the things we started working with 3 principles of customer centricity. It was like, let's talk about solutions and experiences, not just products. Then we said, let's start thinking what the customer will need tomorrow. Let's start thinking about it today. And very important point was, a customer is not just the sales and marketing baby, it's everybody's baby. So in fact, we actually had a video of Mr. Birla with an empty chair next to him. And he actually said, hey, it's me. I follow what the customer says. He's the boss. I'm not the boss. So the term actually created what customer and boss together, because jahan bhi hota, everybody says, who's the boss? We all listen to the boss. So why not make the customer the boss? So that is the cultural softer aspect. From that, we picked up one piece in customer journeys where we thought customer journeys are very easy to understand if done properly. They can be executed by ourselves. So we went about 20 companies, around 28 customer journeys we created with cross-functional teams. I think Samuel also mentioned that. One of the things, get people to sit together and draw up the journey. It's not a job of an agency to come and say, this is the journey. So when we did this, we did the journey, we did the journey steps, we did the moments of truth, both positive and negative. Positives are those thoughts, feelings, actions where the customer is happy. Now, it's important to understand why we track positive, because the journey is not about his experience with us. It is his journey. So in his journey, there are various things which even competition does. So it's important to understand what was making him happy. So that's why the positive moments of truth and the negative moments of truth, those were tracked. Then what we did, we sat down and selected and prioritized you within that one-day workshop. And we put down what actions can we take. So actually, as an exercise, we used to give them caps just to make them forget that they're Mr. Production, Mr. Sales, Mr. This. So you used to let them wear the caps. In a journey, typically like this, you would get up 240 to over 300 moments of truth. Then we would select them. From those, we would pick up a few, maybe 4 or 8, which we would prioritize with actions then and there. Then that is to senior management. Sorry, one more step. With the prioritization of actions, we also say who in the room is responsible for that moment of truth. So that discussion would also close there, and people voluntarily say that this is what I would want to take ahead. And once that is done, then you take it to the next level, which is basically showing to the leadership, picking up the areas that you would work. Once you've completed them, then you take the other aspects of it. Now, interestingly, the customer journey, which we started with keeping the end customer in mind, many of our organization also started talking of us, the whole concept of internal customer. Now, that was a little bit of a challenge for us. Now, we said, what should we do? Should we allow them to start thinking internal customer? Honestly, that defeats the purpose. If each one is going to think only of the internal customer, the whole purpose is defeated. So the whole exercise was, do not think of internal customer, see how each one of us can contribute to the direct end customer. And that's where HR would come and say, how can I help? So then when they saw the customer journey, the customer persona, they say that my sales team, when I recruit to them, they should be able to deal with this kind of customer. So that's how that came. The finance guy would understand how important it is that a particular product reaches the customer on time. And if our distributor there is a particular distributor lock that's happening because he's not able to finish his payment at time, it is left to the finance guy to pick up the phone, talk to the distributor, resolve with him why is this material not gone there, because the customer is suffering. Once that discussion would happen, then with empathy, a solution could be found. So this is how all the functions came in towards our customer journey process. The other thing was, what have we done differently in the pandemic? Now, one interesting piece has been how we have sort of looked at the digital journey maps a little sharper. Not that we didn't look at the digital touch points, but because we were stuck, we couldn't move anywhere in the pandemic, we asked the teams to look at what has changed in the digital footprint that we can approach the customer. It is surprising that so many new ideas and thoughts came. And what we now feel is, pandemic or no pandemic, this exercise of making sure the digital touchpoints at each of the journey stages is very critical to look at. And much of them will stay here. So those are the 2-3 things that we did differently in the organization post the initial 4-5 year concentration on journey mapping.
Look, that's very concise journey of Birla itself, right? So let's ask Abraham. Sir, the outstanding customer journey is something which every marketing leader or a client experience leader is all keen about. Now, it requires deep understanding of the changing customer trends and their needs. Especially the last year has made us realize this at a bigger level. Do you agree? What has been in the industry? Tell us about the industry, sir.
Thank you, Vidya, for that. The most pertinent question, because I think nobody will argue that we are the category that's been the most affected by the pandemic. And I'd say this both individually and as an organization. I think the last 12 months has compressed learning of the last 12 years as marketers, especially, because many things we took for granted. And just for perspective, our retail brands like Thomas Cook and SOTC, for example, pre-COVID, typically about 60% of our customer demand came naturally. Because people were looking for the category, and because we were strong brands and we are strong brands, we anyway had a large part of the customer mind share. So 60%, and so for every 100 customers I acquired, 60 of them came to me almost organically, right? And this completely, almost overnight, was decimated to zero. So I think there's no place to start, which is better than being under severe pressure. And I think as an organization, we had to completely review, because we were no longer dealing with daily challenges of business. There was no business. So we pretty much had to stop and reimagine. And I think in a way, in hindsight, as we sort of hopefully step out of the shadows of the pandemic, I think we've done a lot of things to completely re-engineer and redeploy the organization. And I'll just quickly cover a few of them in sort of a context. First, I think it's important to recognize, and we can all place ourselves in the customer's shoes here, because if we look at the last 12 months, almost conveniently in 60-day buckets, we've actually gone through what I call a 6C journey. We started by being extremely confused because we didn't really understand what was happening. The first 60 days happened that way. Lots of stuff about what the virus is and how we're going to get infected and so on. The second was we were extremely concerned because there was nothing but bad news. Anywhere you looked, it was bad news, right? 60 days later, I think we started being a little bit of the paranoia evaporated. We were being extremely careful because by now there was talk of surface transmission as well as aerosol transmission and stuff like that. 60 days later, we were less paranoid, less careful. You'd probably argue more cautious, but we were stepping out. The lockdowns were easing. People were starting to step out and move around a bit. This was when people were also starting to show the need to travel in some sense because the paranoia had gone. They were missing people, friends, relatives, and so on. We are now in a stage where I'd argue there's a mix of confidence and even in some cases carelessness, because you're seeing people sort of say, okay, listen, it's all over. The vaccine's here. There's no need for masks and so on. I think going forward, 60 days or maybe more, I think we are now going into a coexistence conciliatory phase where we all recognize that we'll have to coexist with the virus for a while, right? Till we reach critical mass on vaccination. And to my mind, our organization has had to go historically and pre-COVID, a lot of what I used to drive at innovation was at a product level. This was more about getting preference, market share, opening new segments, etc., but largely product-based, right? So for example, we created something called a holiday savings account pre-COVID, which is about tapping into the customer savings habit in India to save for a holiday, because we know as Indians, we don't take a loan for a holiday, right? And though that is a category, we realize that actually there's an insight in the fact that we save. So how do we work with banks to actually offer an incentive for people to save so that they got a holiday at the end of the year? This was a classic example of innovation pre-COVID, right? But if you look at the kind of things we've been forced to do post-COVID, there's a host of things that starting from, and you'll appreciate we're a hybrid player, we're both online and offline. Large part of the business is offline. One of the first things we had to do in the first 15 days was actually move our entire physical organization virtual. So actually physical sellers who were normally operating in branches, sitting at home, now had to be equipped both technologically and training wise to be able to serve and service and sell from their homes. So that was the first thing we did. The logical extension of that was to actually create virtual stores, which we did, and we really, in this case, harnessed the benefit of direct selling qualified trained sellers with video technology platforms like Zoom that we are on today to actually create a virtual branch, if you will, that is open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. 365 days a year, where you could actually get the benefit of actually talking to someone like you were in the physical world, right? So that was another example. Another really interesting thing that we had to do, and this is again, the market and customer making, forcing innovation, was because people are so concerned about safety and hygiene. We actually partnered with Apollo Hospitals to launch the most comprehensive travel service safety protocols, which we call the Thomas Cook and SOTC Assured Safe Travel Program. And in these protocols that Apollo helped us develop, we had to not just cover ourselves, because obviously we're an aggregator of other service providers, including airlines, hotels, transfers, and so on. We actually brought them all into the fold, because the only way we could go out there and say that you were safe traveling in a world where the customer thought it was unsafe to travel was to actually say, listen, we have a set of protocols built by an expert and all of us are signing.
That comfort, isn't it? To give that comfort that, you're safe. We are taking care of you.
Absolutely. Right? So Assured was really about saying, here are the protocols to prevent infection. The logical second step, and again, all this came from research, talking to customers, was the fact that, okay, despite all this, what happens if I do get it? So we talked to our insurers, Lombard and Digit, to actually come up with a comprehensive COVID insurance so that the entire sum assured could actually go towards COVID-related hospitalization. This was, again, a product created for the time, right? So that's the second part, insured. The third part is secured, because again, research showed that customers, the other thing they were worried about making travel plans in COVID era was the uncertainty of travel, right? What happens if something gets canceled, lockdown, etc. So we said, we called it secured. We basically said your money is safe. You can reschedule, change your date, get a refund, all that, and that's guaranteed. So in a way, what we were doing with Assured, Insured, Secured was saying that prevention, insurance if it happens, and money safety, right? We're all being taken care of in some sense to give a holistic assurance. And the last extension with Apollo that we did was a logical, next step, which was saying you can get a doctor on call when you travel. So with Apollo, we have a virtual connect with the Apollo doctor with a 20-minute lag, where you can actually get an appointment 24/7, right? Wherever you are in the country, talk to an Apollo doctor. So these were examples. Again, talking of innovation from a COVID point of view, because of the uncertainty of destinations being open, quarantine, etc., we realized it was harder to sell a destination holiday as we would pre-COVID. So what we did was create a holiday card where we told people, we'll give you 15% cash back. If you buy this value, you decide where you want to go, when you want to go, depending on what's open then. You're not locked into a destination or a product or a date, right? Again, these are just some examples of how you can sort of adapt. And I just say one thing before I close. I think the pandemic has changed the travel customer mindset, at least. And I'd argue a lot of services customers, maybe even life insurance. I think you're going to definitely have a more, what I call the 4D customer perspective going forward. One, there's going to be a lot more deliberation before deciding anything, especially if it's discretionary. Two, they're going to be very discerning about their choice. They're going to do all the homework because they value money more. They're more worried about the future. That's going to be a bit overhang for a bit. They're going to be more demanding and detail oriented because, again, for the same reason, their money they feel is more valuable than ever before. They're going to ask more of the seller. And finally, I think from an experience point and to the point of customer experience as well, I think they're going to be very discovery focused. So the experience is going to matter as much as the end goal of buying the product or traveling to a destination, the destination itself. So I think that's a role all of us need to play. What's the kind of experience we want to deliver? And I'll just give you one example of our own point of view on this during the pandemic. Most of the travel companies went into hibernation when the pandemic hit because they didn't want customers to ask for the money back for people who had already booked. We took the decision to reach out to all our customers, tell them the money was safe, and that if they wanted it, we'd give it back to them. And I think that single action, besides the confidence they had in the brands, 80% of the customers were quite happy to allow us, to hold their money till they were ready to travel, with a credit model. And I think that's really a cue of what customers want us to do: be responsible, be transparent, and take the proactive, transparent steps to build confidence during these times. And I think post-pandemic, the brands that actually play this role will come out stronger than the ones that don't.
I think the crisis has actually gone ahead and given more empathy to people, more innovation to the organizations to satisfy their customers, because they have read butter. In one of my other conversations, somebody said biryani and roti are also dependent on customers, right? And like Soumya rightly mentioned, and Prakash, you added as well, so the customers are the boss, and you just have to be listening to the boss. If you start thinking like them, I think it will be easy for you to start serving them better. Prakash, I know you are very passionate about customer journey. So have you seen any similar major steps that other organizations outside of your organization in the industry who have taken some significant steps to do that?
So in fact, before coming to that, I just wanted to a very excellent example of the Thomas Cook journey, and I like the trust that you put into customers. So one slightly different point is when we were doing this, our salespeople came to us, and that's an interesting perspective how we could use the customer journey to one more level, because they came back and saying everything is shut down. How do I do my sales? So then we said we need to see how we can do virtual selling. So even in the virtual selling process, we went about understanding the customer's journey. One was, and I'm talking of B2B sales here. So one was exploration. Customers are wanting to explore new ideas. How do you do that in a pandemic? Second, I think, they were talking about once you explore, then they need to evaluate your services. Then there is an area space of negotiation. And then, as is always, firefighting, crisis management, and one interesting one was technical service. How do you do technical service in the times of pandemic? So we structured the journey like this to our internal sales people, and for each of these 4 or 5 areas, we decided how we could do virtual selling to these people. So that meant training them on all the techniques. That meant bringing the confidence back in them. We can do this virtually, and many of our salespeople, we of course use Teams as nobody's business now, but believe me, that tool was there with us, and I'm sure this is true for everybody. And we had not used it before March 20th. So the idea was not just the tools.
Can I just ask, how long did it take to actually train these people? Because they were never trained for virtual selling earlier, right? How long did you take to do that? How resilient?
So that was another interesting one. When we started, like a typical virtual organization, I handle capability also in addition to my customer centricity piece. So the whole idea came to us, can you please look into this? So as usual, we looked around the world, went to a Harvard professor, this professor, that professor. Then what we saw that none of the offerings were really good. And then we actually built our own program with our own people. And we used the model of role plays. So what we did, got the role plays together. Each one of the initial batch of 4 people would take 4 people. And then we did role plays over 4. Each of these stages would be 2-hour sessions. So about 4 weeks. But each one of them practiced with another set of 4 people. So this way we did a train the trainer, and none of these people are from HR, nor am I from HR. We all picked up the role play piece. We recorded something and cascaded to the entire organization. The scope became 16 became 64. Soon we had covered a batch of 300 people who went ahead and trained it together. And they all did it to their own teams. So now you're right about it. For us, for people like you and me who have had dealt with video conferences before, it was a little easier. But the fact to enact role plays without any hand holding, use that as a medium was amazing. And the entire organization supported us. We covered a batch of 300 in a period of about 6 weeks. And that continued. So much so that even after the pandemic, it's a rolling program on its own. So that's one example of customer journey that we actually used. And believe me, the whole thought was the customer was first. In fact, the program we called as B2Me, business to me, is the customer. We said, don't think of the personal effect that you're doing there. We didn't let go of the fact of the customer journey piece. We could have called it just virtual selling, but we said, no, do it what the customer wants. At an exploration stage, he needs to understand what are the various offerings. So how do you pitch to him at that point of time using a cross-functional team from your side, the sales guy, the logistics guy, all of them go and give him options, get out the best articles and send them to him, show them live on that exploration stage. Evaluation stage, that stage where he's waiting and deciding. In that intermediary period, send him some interesting articles and pieces, have a call with him, and then decide what needs to be done. Negotiation, we did things like, getting on the spot approval. So if there's a critical point being discussed online, suddenly stop the call the line manager. Line manager was told this call is happening at this time. I may need you to come in to give me a special sanction. So immediate special sanction was given to them.
Those were all live cases that you call immediately, get your answers. Wow, that's really good to know, Prakash, that this affected the direct sales people, right? So the with the direct.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I would probably want your inputs, and in fact, the pandemic has actually shown some upward trend on direct sellers. The people who were staying at home, who wanted to pick up a sort of secondary income, or channel their people who have missed their regular job. They probably wanted to start their direct selling. So did you see any changes due to the pandemic in the last year?
You're asking me, right?
Yes, Dipali.
Yeah, I understand. Oh, yeah. So definitely, there's a notion that direct sellers would have been hit a lot because in this virtual world, there's no face-to-face interaction. But to your surprise, I would say that almost most of the direct selling companies have actually shown a growth. And as I was listening to, about Thomas Cook, I would say that just the opposite has happened with us. I won't say it's very nice. I'm not feeling very happy about it. It's in a very unfortunate situation. But fact is that, and especially why I'm saying us and from world of Amway, we are very much strong in the world of nutrition, and the awareness of people on nutrition, health and wellness has gone so high that we really, our business really took a big jump. So that's from the industry perspective. But from just to your question, from direct selling perspective, actually what happened, this whole scenario actually helped in building the spirit of entrepreneurship much more. So if in today's world, if you read, people are the mindset of entrepreneurship, and in our country, we have started talking about Atmanirbhar, be on your own, to have your own business. Those concepts are building so high. And when you go to a lot of research also, you see that young people are very much for entrepreneurship, and that went in the direct selling industry favor. So even some of the companies, and this is not about India, I'm talking about globally, even some of the direct selling companies who are on the stock market, initially they saw a decline. But if you now see a year after, all those companies who are on the stock market, even they are showing a big boom, and there's a big rise in their stock levels. So the COVID unfortunate opportunity actually unleashed entrepreneurship with social commerce. That's what happened. Now, as I was talking, that the focus towards acquiring more customers, retaining them, everything went in the direction of social media. And we, as everybody in the panel are saying that we woke up and we have tried new things. Even in our industry, we realized one of the challenge we always faced was that these direct sellers who are there in the market, they were not very much equipped with social media. And people, not very young people were there in the population of direct sellers, distributors, whom we call as, and they always used to struggle with social. It's not that the company or the industry was not focusing towards it, but this set of consumers who are direct sellers, they were not ready to pick up the social world.
So, but direct selling, can you say that Facebook's and Twitter's, increase the content or increase the mobility of these direct sellers? Can that be a fair statement?
I didn't get your sentence. What do you say?
So Facebook's and Twitter's have increased the mobility of the direct selling. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that is fair.
And not only for Amway, right? I believe, Rakesh, your area of work, industry, also has a lot of direct selling. I'm sure there will be some kind of inputs there. Rakesh, do you want to share something?
Yes, Vidya. So as Dipali was sharing, I think in the first 6-7 months, the direct business across industries took the maximum hit. There were a huge amount of headwinds because traditionally direct sales has been a face-to-face kind of sales channel. But what we had to do from in the life insurance industry and particularly in our business was to quickly transform ourselves to a digital mode of operating. So from a face-to-face model, we actually transitioned towards a home-to-home or a edge-to-edge selling. And to actually, given that the times that we were going through and customers were not, really open to taking calls and open to, let's say, a sales conversation, we actually built the element of empathy that I was talking about. And this edge to edge or home to home selling was positioned more as a heart to heart selling, edge to edge, and that really, sort of sensitize the employees how to really go about doing those interactions. So there are 4 things that we did, just to summarize, Vidya. One is really, communicate. Communication was very important. And for it.
4 key words here, Rakesh. I'm sorry, we are running out of time, and I have one last question on digitization and innovation. So probably you can give us 4 key words on the 4 parts that you're talking about.
Sorry. Do you want to move on to?
No, we are running out of time. So I want you to give us those 4 things that you're just talking about.
Yeah, quickly. Absolutely. I'll just quickly summarize, Vidya. So first was communication, and typically in direct business, Vidya, communication to customers really holds the key in terms of empathy, in terms of really building trust and
communication is the first one.
That's one. Secondly, how really you accelerated your digital adoption for in the seller community was the next big thing, big element, and that required also the customers to understand and evolve their understanding on the digital front. So that was second element, and a lot of initiatives actually and work happened on that area. Third one was around how do you enable your sellers to operate in a digital environment and be able to service the customers to the desired levels. And the fourth element was Vidya, about really listening to the customers. So as we implemented the digital processes and digital assets, how were the customers experiencing it? So deploying listening posts to understand, get feedback, and continue to really improve and improvise over a period of time. These are the 4 things that we did. And therefore, what as a learning, Vidya, we picked up is that going forward, the direct sales industry is going to become a more hybrid kind of a thing, which is, let's say, a physical face-to-face enabled through digital channels, which is everything that many of us have shared. So that to my mind is the way forward, really.
Great, thank you. Soumil, you had a point to make.
And if I just may quickly say, it's called phygital, the new word that has come in. So physical with digital, that's the new.
Physical to digital is phygital. Great. Soumil.
Nothing, just two small, quick points. So Prakash talked about, the customer being the boss. So I'll just flip the entire thing that in generally in Indian context or even in global context, bosses are, people upstream, in the hierarchy. Let's invert the pyramid and say bosses are downstream. So that's one way of looking at things that will, really ease off everything and, give a streamlined view. Second point is on what Rakesh said, there are customers who still would, prefer to make payments through check. My father is one of them. He's still not digitized. So yes, you have got a lot of customers like that. And that's the challenge for all of us, that how do we balance out these varied and eclectic breed of customers? And on IVR, as customers, like I interact with 5 to 6 financial institutions for various products, insurance, credit card, saving accounts, loans, etc. And I observe IVR of all of them, and there is a lot to learn by each other. So that's how, you can, as customers also, we can really learn how to deliver, customer experience or enhance it. Thank you.
If you just listen. Yeah, correct. Thank you so much. I think that will be our end of today's session. Thank you so much for all your participation. I hope we continue to interact and cross paths in our lives. And I hope all the important messages that we got from you are very useful for our audience. Thank you so much. Over to you back.
Thank you so much. Well, all our panelists, this has been a really rich panel, and we've had a lot to take back from everything that y'all have shared. But before I close, and I know we've run out of time, we've got a small ritual going where I call customer You Say Fest. Okay, so everybody, this is going to be our closing. Bring in the energy. You can unmute yourself, and let's create a cacophony of energy going out there to everybody who's listening in, and everybody at home, join us as well. On the count of 3, 3, 2, 1. Customer
Fest.
Customer
Fest.
All right, thank you